E-commerce is a tech-driven channel, and so when retailers look to enhance their online performance, the first place they look is for more technology solutions. However, the consumer is still a human being, whether shopping online or offline, so connecting with them on a more personal basis is proving to be as important as the functionality that tech provides. For a growing number of retailers, the ability to humanize their online stores is showing game-changing results. I'm Jane Singer, and welcome to A Seat at the Table. Each week, I sit down with leading executives, entrepreneurs, educators, and authors who share their insights, experiences, and future vision for business. In this episode, I'm talking with Lucy Norris, Head of Content at Ecrubox Digital, a UK-based digital communications agency. For the last 2 decades, Lucy has served as an advisor for a host of corporate, celebrity, and nonprofit clients, providing strategic advice to help individuals and organizations tell their story. Today she'll be discussing some of the insights from a recent study that Ecrubox has done to better understand the role of humanization in driving online sales and loyalty. Before we get started, if you're looking to develop knitwear collections that will be bestsellers, both online and offline, then Spin Expo is the place to go. From trend information to technical innovation, Spin Expo is the primary exhibition for yarns and knitwear. The fair provides well-edited forums featuring high-quality products that are bursting with creativity. You can learn more at spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. There's also a link in the show notes. And check out our website. You can find all of the previous episodes of A Seat at the Table, the show notes, news about our upcoming masterclass series, and lots of other useful information. You can find it at seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. FM because it's a podcast. Now let's hear Lucy's views on why we need to add a human touch to our e-commerce stores. How are you, Lucy?
I'm doing well.
Thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
You were telling me that you had done this massive study talking about the humanization of e-commerce, and I thought that was so interesting because e-commerce has become such a big thing, and yet the one factor that's missing is that human side that you get from physical retail. So tell me a little bit about what you've been doing with the study, what you've found.
Yes, so we actually started filming segments in February. I was noticing this connection between how there were a lot of retail spaces that, of course, were creating experiences, and that was attracting consumers. And we wanted to just dive into that a little bit more, sort of what was that intersection between product, consumer, and technology. And then, of course, the pandemic came about and everything changed instantly. Everything was suddenly online. So a lot more connection needed to be developed throughout the websites, throughout the virtual platforms that brands were actually now incorporating. And what was really something that we kind of noticed from the get-go was the fact that in order for them to attract the attention, to engage with them, and to entice them to continue to come back, there needed to be an element of humanization. So those brands that were putting the humans, the consumers at the forefront, were the ones that were really going to kind of get ahead in this game. Generally, when it came to the luxury websites, that's where we really saw a big space because they had ultimately always attracted the consumer by enticing them into the store, and it was that level of exclusivity and that personalized experience that they would gain when walking into that designer store that wasn't available on the websites, and to this day is still not necessarily there. So this is when technology, of course, accelerated during lockdown. It wasn't that it wasn't happening before, but suddenly there was a big opportunity for consumers and also for brands to really, tap into this in order to make that experience online really become something that we like to say human commerce. So the whole campaign went from a video series that started off physically to then everything is virtual. So we created the video series. We also did a report where we highlighted stakeholders, decision makers, CEOs, thought leaders from around the world, mostly ones that we've never met before, but we all did through this sort of virtual connection and networking. And then a survey as well where we actually reached out to a number of different digital marketers to find out where they were actually paying close attention to post-lockdown when it came to this sort of intersection between product, consumer, and technology.
From your research, what were people doing right in terms of being able to create a more human experience?
Personalization is number one. So whenever a consumer was going onto a website and they felt as though, the brand was really speaking to them, the brand is becoming somewhat of a friend to them, that is something that they were, of course, more inclined to stay on and to dive into and to ultimately buy from. It was also the community aspect. So when we've looked at retail spaces before and they've developed these sort of, experiences in the physical world, those brands that were able to create a sense of digital community online, whether it was through quizzes, whether it was through content, whether it was through asking the consumers, what do you want to see next? What do you want to see in the campaign? What do you want from our next product? So ultimately, the brand is actually getting a lot of feedback when it comes to what products and how they need to be marketing, the next collection that they're putting out there. But at the same time, the consumer felt as though that they were being listened to. And of course, during lockdown, that was something that they really wanted more than ever. They were craving that element of, yes, someone is listening to what it is that I want, and there is a sense of communication. Also, any website that was able to really create a digital storefront. So it wasn't just a blanketed experience of, yes, I'm going to go online because I already know what I want to buy, but more a journey as in, oh, I've discovered this brand, say on Instagram or on some other social platform, and now I'm going to the website and it's opening up this story of this brand that I wasn't necessarily aware of, but I'm experiencing lots of different elements to this company. That was also key. Any brand, and we were already aware of it before lockdown, but when it comes to sustainability, any brand that was able to really share the story of the supply chain, of the making element, of the founders, whether it be throughout content or some form of technology. We spoke to a company called Blue Byte, and they are brilliant when it comes to actually incorporating technology into a product. And when you purchase that product, it unleashes up-to-date, relevant content. So that was a way of really blending the online to the offline experience with technology. So these were some of the highlights that we found, at the top of the actual report. We noticed, 2 in 5 UK shoppers say that they will make more online purchases after lockdown ends, which really kind of made us think, all right, so we're already shifted. We already know that e-commerce is popular, that this is the way that we shop. However, it needs to be more of a digital experience that makes it so that we want to continue doing this and it's not just a one-off during lockdown.
So in other words, by creating this more human experience, it would be more compelling for people to come back and shop online even once the shops are open.
Exactly. And I think those brands that will ultimately kind of, again, come out on top, and I hate using that phrase, but it is true, are the ones that understand the synergy between what online can do for them and what offline can continue to do for them if that space becomes available for them. So, for example, one of our guests, he is the founder of P&Co, which is a big sort of clothing company here in the UK. And he said that, experience, what will happen is those retail spaces will become more of a showroom to the collection, a showroom to the brand, because at the end of the day, everything that we experience online is still, it's visual. We can't feel it. We can't smell it. So there are some things that we'll still want and embrace when we actually have that physical opportunity to engage with the brand. However, once we go to that showroom as such, then we're going to go online and we want that digital experience. We want something that physical experience wasn't able to do. And also those brands who are able to collect that data, to collect that information that personalizes both experiences in different ways, will again make the consumer want to shop with this sort of idea of human commerce?
I think that's quite interesting because there really are two sort of opposing forces, for lack of a better word, and that is that on the one hand you have the convenience of e-commerce, and then on the other hand you have the experiential side of going into stores, and then of course depending upon how well the store is presenting itself or how well the website is presenting itself, it's either a better or worse experience. I think one of the big questions that a lot of people might have when you're talking about making a website a little more experiential is experience versus making it frictionless. In other words, sometimes you'll go on a site and that site will be very beautiful, right? They'll have a lot of videos, they'll have music, they'll have all kinds of things going on, and yet it loads really slowly. Or you have to go through all of that and you're thinking, I already know what I want. I mean, on the other hand, you have sites that are just stripped down, right? Like that's a basic Amazon model, which is cut to the chase. So how do you see sites, and maybe this is more of a technical issue, but how do you see them managing to have the experience while also creating that ease of use?
So I think from the survey that we put together, we found out that 60% of marketers said that improving the purchase journey would be key focus post-COVID, which goes exactly to what you said just there, Jane. We see Amazon, which is extremely successful and very sort of simple and basic in the outlay of how they actually put their product to the front. I think it will generally come back down to this idea of streamlining the purchase journey so that it is very personalized. And it's going to take a lot of effort. And it's going to take a lot of thought, and the infrastructure will really have to be, well designed in order to be able to do this. I think the people that we'll start to see actually give us some great case studies at the very top are going to be the marketplaces, who are actually representing a number of brands. One area to look at will be the sustainable marketplaces, who are definitely becoming that promotional tool for those sustainable brands, those independent brands that we already know that there is demand for when it comes to consumers, but there isn't necessarily the marketing budget for them to be able to get their message or their stories across. So I think those marketplaces that are creating a platform for those specific brands are the ones who possibly could actually, jump into a space right now where we'll actually see that personalized journey become effective, become frictionless and seamless as well, because we don't have time to not get what we want, even though we've had the time in lockdown where we've become very conscious of what we're buying, how we're buying it. Now, more than ever, our expectations are even higher. So it needs to be quick, it needs to be fast, but it also needs to be that level of customer experience that we would have expected if we'd have gone into a store and actually asked somebody, here's what we want. I do also think one element to this will be streamlined video. And I don't know how many brands will actually be able to incorporate this quickly, but actually, instead of the virtual chat where we know that we're not necessarily talking to a person, it's a bot. What we'll want, and those companies that can actually invest in it, is we want those salespeople that we would have actually been speaking to in the store. We want a place on those websites where we can have real-time chat with them so that they can show us, obviously we're all socially distancing because we're not even in the store, but they can give us a virtual tour, they can take us around the showroom, they can give us real-time engagement, and that will also increase that consumer journey because it's real-time answers that they're giving us in return. So I think actually incorporating humans at a later stage with this virtual chat element will help personalize that experience without the need for all of the software and technology. But again, that is going to take an investment on the brand side. You do have those bigger brands that have a lot of retail associates that, of course, they're having to make redundant right now. There's a lot of changes happening, but there is an opportunity for them to be used differently if they embrace this idea of human commerce.
I think that is really an outstanding idea. And I think that really could be the secret sauce, Lucy. I think it's one of the areas that people have overlooked because technology is so fascinating, to me too, and there's so many capabilities. AI, augmented reality. There's so many things that can be done to mimic the personal experience. And yet, like you said, there's nothing like communicating with a real person. You know, whether that person is getting back to you by a phone call or a personal email. And then in this case, you could actually be online and having that communication with them, having that as an option. I think that's really brilliant.
I hope that that's something that we lean more towards, because I think throughout the study, throughout the interviews, what we have noticed is that there is this, it's a tug of war between, technology and personalization. And, we are not saying with this campaign, this was more of us, putting together insights and information and just following what it was that we were interested in and trying to find answers. But I do think that there's ways in which, the human-centric approach to commerce can complement what technology is able to do. It just really needs to be thought out in a way that both parties are involved, so that ultimately what we really want is the consumers to just have an incredible experience and want to buy from that brand, tell their friends about it, continue to come back to that brand so that brand grows. And I really personally, from doing the campaign and the study, I do hope that element of bringing humans into the digital storefronts is going to be the way forwards, because I think, it will save a lot of jobs and it will also help meet the demands of the consumers as well.
I think that's really important. And I think the fact that what you're proposing here is a two-way digital experience, whereas previously it was one way with live streaming, which is essentially somebody getting online. Okay, that you have the personal side because you see them and they're presenting, but it's still only one way. Whereas this way, there can be that conversation between the salesperson and the customer, which is really truly a personal interaction.
And I think one thing that a lot of our guests had brought up that we've actually phrased throughout this campaign, you hear a lot as you go through the video series and also as you read the report, is this element of delight, which goes back to what you said there, Jane, of, it has to be this wow factor, and it can't just be, oh, we're going to this website and we're expecting this information, but give the consumer some form of delight. We interviewed a company, it's an AI company called Big Thinks, and they work with augmented reality and creating these virtual experiences for one of their services is for virtual showrooms. And it's this idea of we have to now give the consumer more than what they're expecting, and so that it is something that they will continue to come back for. And at the end of the day, we're all craving connection. We're all craving some form of communication. And I think whatever brand is able to do that in a personalized way and add that delight is really some brand that we need to keep an eye on when it comes to this idea of human commerce.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. On the other side, how do we balance, on the one hand, making things more personal, which of course is what we want to achieve, and on the other hand, we also see a rising fear, so to speak, from consumers. This whole data privacy issue has become really big, and in many ways it's quite a valid concern.
It's funny that you said that. I was just watching the piece yesterday that Netflix has brought out on social media, and it is very concerning for all consumers, because it kind of contradicts what it is that we want. We want a personalized experience, but we also want everyone to respect our privacy as well. And so I think that there are options and solutions out there so that brands can do both. We've worked with a company called Oracle Technology, and what they have is something called the Sense Engine. We, as an agency, we want to make sure that the brands that we're partnered with really do have a full understanding of their target audience and what they want. But again, at the same time, we have to respect the privacy of their consumers. And so how do you become niche and specific whilst also respecting all of those areas? So Oracle Technology use the Sense Engine and really are able to pull up, and it's remarkable, a very granular approach to the target audience. And this is, just the way that they use this technology. This is wonderful, because then what happens is the brand can take all of this information and suddenly they can customize the consumer's journey and the purchase journey throughout using this detail that the sense engine has gathered. And so therefore it's more of group orientated as to being individual on that level. But yet at the same time, you still feel as a consumer as though the brand is talking to you without kind of going into your home and looking throughout all of your rooms. It's, oh, you know me, that's great, but yet there is still space between me and you. So I think that technology such as Oracle technology are solutions that brands should be looking out for in order to do that. And I think the other part to all of this is that a brand can't do all of it by itself. They can have the wonderful creative ideas and they can think of the ways in which to engage their community. But this is a conversation between the innovators in the tech world. It's a conversation between the creators within brands, and then also what's happening on the consumer front. So you do need companies that really are analyzing consumer behavior and noticing those shifts. So it won't happen independently. This is where more brands will need to partner, more brands will need to collaborate. And that's when you'll be able to start to see businesses scale with the human commerce approach.
Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. But, it still leaves open this whole issue of privacy that consumers feel very passionate about. And I think that, when you go into a store, a person is there, so you have the human contact, right? They can help you find what you're looking for. They can give you feedback about how it fits or how it looks on you, make other suggestions. So you have all of that, but nobody is sort of capturing that. There's no, you know what I mean? There's no video recorder in the background. There's nobody taping what you're saying. So people feel comfortable. Whereas I think that increasingly people feel very uneasy knowing that every move they make online is being captured in one way or another. How do we give the consumer that sense that, yes, you're getting this personalized experience on our website, but we're also respecting your privacy?
But yeah, no, I completely agree with you. How do we ensure that they are safe within this virtual store that these brands are creating? And it's not a case now, I don't think, that they will have the option to say, well, it's fine, I'm just not going to shop online. I'm just going to always go back to that store, because this isn't going anywhere. We need to be able to make sure that they can feel secure online. And I think that there is, brands will need to do a lot more. They'll need to be asking a lot more questions with the partners that they're working and the way that they're actually building out their own infrastructure. So it is something that we're just going to have to work towards and also translate that and make that known. So just like you're saying, well, the consumers will want to know all of this right now. Brands are putting at the front, okay, we are sustainable because of X, Y, and Z. This is our sustainable business model. This is sustainable ingredients. See past everything so that you really understand our supply chain. But on top of that, what they will have to do is also say, this is why you're secure shopping in this store. This is why we respect your privacy. This is how you can ensure it yourself because of X, Y, and Z. So again, that will have to be something that they include in that whole experience.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think you're absolutely right about it, that's going to be the next big thing, is to be able to assure consumers that we respect your privacy and how data is being managed and so forth, because I believe that will become an increasing area of contention as people become very, I don't want to say paranoid, but it is the word that comes to mind about what's happening with their data and who's watching them, so to speak.
So true. And I'm thinking about branded content, as you say, because it's an excellent point that you bring up. And I think sometimes, especially in our world, my world of marketing and content, we do get very much attracted to these idea of, oh, that's, it's innovative and it's original and this looks cool and this will be a great experience. But yet at the same time, we do have to really consider these fundamental issues that you're bringing up. So I think in all areas now, we are just going to have to be very, very honest with the consumer, with privacy, with the way that we sell.
I think that's a really good point you make, and I think that we've sort of come full circle, and now we're back to those old values that made a brand trustworthy before. I mean, why would you buy a brand in the early days of brands being developed as brands? It was because it was a name you could trust, so to speak. So that was the foundation of why people wanted to buy a branded product. So maybe we're now having come all the way back to that.
I agree. And I think something that many brands can start to implement without thinking and getting ahead of themselves and kind of being overwhelmed with all of this software and technology and personalization elements. One thing that every brand can start to do is actually implement and incorporate the founder's message, the team message, and it can't be a blanket statement. It can't just be a typical bio, but that's when video needs to be included. We saw during lockdown when you had the founders have to come out, there's a sense of vulnerability now with content as well, because we've gone into everyone's homes with Zoom and, with these very raw videos that we've had to put out. And I think that to include that on your website is the first step of human commerce, because suddenly you see who is actually behind this brand. There is an element of trust there when it's done well. And if those pieces of content are updated, that they give real-time information, and if it's from the founder and from the team, I think that is the first part of creating a human commerce experience and an element of human commerce on any website, regardless of the budget.
That's a good point, and I think that there has certainly been some shifts that have come about because of the lockdowns and so forth that will probably be very impactful on the way we do things in the future, things that we would never have touched had we not been forced to go in that direction.
Completely. And it's been a remarkable few months when it comes to the way that we're connecting, the way that we're buying, the way that we are selling, because we've had to change rapidly overnight.
Yeah, that's true. We haven't had the luxury of a long timeline, and that's been, both a blessing and a curse. With regard to e-commerce, it has been a very good thing.
Very much so. And I think that we all, we were all aware that, yes, we're shopping online and consumers want that and they can shop from the palm of their hands. But now there is this demand for a different type of experience, by putting humans at the center of innovation and technology. It goes back to this idea of being able to create delight throughout the whole digital experience. I think it really has to evolve from just this transactional experience to a more memorable one. And it has to become as delightful. And in some ways, you have to want to continue to go back to that brand like you would have done it when shopping in store. So the way that this evolves and the way that this moves forwards and the way that offline and online can complement each other by using all of this information is something that, we're very excited for. And we hope that this campaign, the report and the video series, which is ongoing, can just ignite ideas and also just create conversation, because Jane, just talking about this campaign with you, you've brought ideas to me. So now that leads me to now find somebody to ask that question to continue on the conversation throughout the series. So I think that there is space for this to just continue to evolve and to stay on top of.
Where can people who are listening find the report that you mentioned? Is that available?
It is. So if you go to ecruboxdigital.com, and then if you just type in human commerce, there are many articles on the website just around human commerce, what it is, but you'll also have that option to download the full report. There'll also be a link that will take you to the channel where you can watch the series, where we've interviewed a number of different thought leaders, CEOs, and just innovators around this idea of human commerce.
Wow, that sounds really good. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing more of what you've been working on.
Definitely.
Lucy, thank you so much for joining us today. This has really been great.
And I want to thank you, Jane, for giving us the opportunity just to share our work with your listeners. So thank you.
Oh, well, listen, it's a pleasure, and I've learned a lot talking to you, Lucy.
Thanks again, Jane.
If you enjoyed this episode of A Seat at the Table, join me each week when I sit down with leading executives, entrepreneurs, educators, and authors who share their insights, experiences, and future vision for business. And make sure to visit Spin Expo. From trend information to technical innovation, Spin Expo is the primary exhibition for yarns and knitwear. The fair provides well-edited forums featuring high-quality products that are bursting with creativity. To learn more, go to spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. You can also find a link in the show notes for this episode. Before you go, if you're looking for a concise view of key shifts, opportunities, and risks in global sourcing, then check out The Current Situation in Sourcing. You'll find a link in the show notes. And don't forget to check out our podcast website, where you can find all of the previous episodes of the Seat at the Table podcast, the show notes, news about our upcoming masterclass series, plus lots of other useful information. You can find it at seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. FM because it's a podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in the next podcast episode.